This was mostly long overdue, but considering it takes time for me to get back into the show, and my last Foster's review had nothing to do with Bloo being the main character, this is literally the perfect opportunity to do a shout out, but also addressing the video of the topic that I'm going to be discussing involving Bloo's character in the episode that I'm going to be reviewing today. The Hidden Pain of Blue God Kyukuzu Foster's Home Character Analysis. This was uploaded from 2023 by Lovely Lively V, and it really didn't get a lot of attention. I mean, it did when it came out, but honestly, it deserves more attention judging of how her point of view really gave me a different perspective on Bloo's character just a little bit more. And the purpose of this review is that upon watching this episode from beginning to end, and after considering on giving not only a shout out to Lovely Lively V's video on the topic, but also mostly a wake-up call for Blue haters, which I don't think I'm going to be able to change their minds, but with me advertising Lovely Lively's video on the topic, this is literally the only way for me to advertise and also giving her a shout out, considering that Blue's the Boss is the closest episode, well, in a season 4 episode where Bloo is slightly likable. I mean, he is a little selfish in this episode, but the way I see it, it really feels like that with him carrying the entire episode really shows of how the execution of this episode showcases of her points on viewing Bloo's hidden pain in this show. The beginning of this episode shows Bloo that there's an imaginary friend on the loose somewhere, and he informs the other characters to help out the imaginary friend, and he's also willing to help out, but apparently he's a screw-up, just like how he is throughout the majority of this show. But the difference is that his goal in this is that he wants to be the person that can do good deeds just like Madame Foster, but the biggest difference is that Madame Foster is a good person, and this is somewhat similar to the season 1 or 2 episode where Bloo wants to one up against Wilt because Wilt did good deeds, but apparently no matter what he does, it ends up backfiring due to him not having the best execution, but also making poor decisions. For the longest time, whenever I think about this episode, when I remember it during my childhood, I always look at this episode as every other episode that is supposed to be white noise during my youthful times. But thinking about this information of Lovely Lively's V's ideal of Bloo's hidden pain, it may be difficult to understand, but it really showcased that Bloo is trying something good, despite the fact that he only makes things worse, which is honestly the depressing reality that if he wasn't hateable or selfish, I'm pretty sure he would try to do some deeds, but it'll end up backfiring, because one of the deeds that he did in this episode is making the entire floor in the main entrance completely clean that everyone slips, which is a funny moment, but this also showcased that everyone was completely injured, and Bloo ended up becoming a laughing stock on the news. So he ends up making his own home of imaginary friends, which in all honesty just showcase of how much he is selfish by being extremely petty, which is what I think of if I don't think about Lovely Lively's V's video. But then again, judging of how Bloo is executed throughout this entire episode and him trying to do a good deed, honestly, if he did the same methods of what Madame Foster did, I'm pretty sure it would have been a lot more complicated for him to actually succeed on his goal on getting recognition. Because the fact that this show has the same methods of what Mac did in the Bloo and Walt episode of him getting a call, which is over the top. While in this episode, Madame Foster gets so much attention by meeting the president and whatnot, it really gave you the impression that the rewards that the characters get are just spitting the face off on characters like Bloo. And the episode Big City Greens involving Cricket lowering stunks inside the cafe was similar to how Bloo is selling a lost kitten that isn't imaginary, is considered cheating and selfish. But considering that we reached to Mac in this episode, you people are not going to like what I'm about to say, but whenever Mac is the voice of reason and when he goes a little too harsh towards Bloo despite being truthful, it really makes Blue's motivation really difficult to avoid due to him just trying to do a good deed. Now, in the Foster's Bus episode, it makes sense because Bloo is driving and he's too young to having a driver's license, but at the same time he's never gonna have a driver's license when he gets older, and with Mac being part of the scenario of chaos on the road, it's justifiable for him to being frustrated. But with him just calling out Bloo and the fact that he is literally trying way too hard to get to Blue's head, to instantly understand that what he's doing is extremely wrong and it's not getting him anywhere. Lovely Lively V really expressed of how much Mac's character, along with the other characters, have selfish moments that have been overlooked too much to compare to Blue's unlikability. It's hard to believe, but you should probably watch the video to get an understanding of what I mean despite being 2 hours long. The point I'm trying to make is that the mean-spirited nature in this show that has been tackled multiple times really shows that it's the show's biggest weakness when it comes to focusing on one character rather than focusing on other characters. Even though that some characters don't deserve any torture like Frankie from the Imposters episode, it doesn't change the fact that whenever you have the mindset of Bloo, despite being created by Mac when he was 3 years old, it really feels like that the possible development that he would have gotten if Quake had the opportunity to give him development would have made him a completely different character, and the mean-spirited nature from the other characters would have been foreshown. Because, if you ask me, with Cartoon Network executives demanding Blue's character to never change and being this flanderized for kids to enjoy, honestly, the popularity that this show got from Blue's character really did so much damage and goodwill that this show, when people say it's one of the best Cartoon Network shows of our time, they try their best to make sure that the bad episodes don't get mentioned. But then again, shows of fan bases like the Loud Tales tried to say the same, but to be perfectly real, eliminating bad episodes from shows isn't going to change the fact that the mean-spirited nature really drags these shows down due to the direction that they took, not just one character. Let's look into the scenes of Bloo talking to objects like Sharkhead and Purple, which are lame names, but when people are completely forgetting that he was created by a 3-year-old and the fact that he can't get any older because of that, usually I don't follow this method in other shows because with those elements being played in other shows, they go a little too over the top. And while it does go over the top in this, the one thing that I'm forgiving is that the person who created his imaginary friend can't be able to improve no matter what. I mean, You may say that some imaginary friends do improve later on, but my knowledge of watching this show whenever I get the chance is that some imaginary friends just don't usually improve and they'll mostly stay the same, which is something that I'm willing to understand, that they may have disabilities where they can't be able to improve on themselves. But if that's the case, then it does showcase that Bloo can't be able to do the right thing when it comes to his deeds by not doing any bad deeds. And since that the bad deed that he did is that he really missed the kitten so much to the point that it got him company, he ends up going to the family's apartment where the kitten is, and he reunites it but also steals it, which is another selfish deed that he did. But in all honesty, if he wasn't this flanderized and it was actually likable, honestly, is it difficult to consider this as a selfish deed? Because the way I see it, it makes me feel like that this was an episode that Craig really wanted to showcase Bloo's likability and improvement, but due to what's been happening behind the scenes, honestly, I can't imagine what the people were feeling when they were making Bloo like this. For how the episode concluded, once the kitten nearly gets herself completely wet, Madame Fossil saves Bloo, which in all honesty doesn't even really feel like a rescue, considering that the river itself isn't that deep. And when it comes to a misunderstanding that the kitten was the owner towards someone else and not an imaginary friend all along, this gave Bloo an instant idea by giving the family another imaginary friend, which was the same imaginary friend that Madame Foster saved earlier in the episode. And after getting congratulated by the other characters, they shrug it off, as in not giving Bloo anything, to the point that what they went through really meant nothing at the end, aside from Bloo thinking that he deserves to get rewarded. If this literally is about doing more than one good deed similar to Madame Foster, it's one thing, but then again, it doesn't change the fact that they just shrug it off as if it was nothing, to the point that it's difficult to see Bloo mostly in the white while he doesn't get rewarded due to at least doing one good deed, even though anyone else could do it. But at the same time, would you usually expect Bloo to do something like this? It would have given him actual development if he actually get some kind of intention. At least in the Big City Greens episode, Cricket, despite causing the ruckus in the cafe, got a muffin. It was a stinky muffin, sure, but at the same time, he at least got something. It is gonna take another long time for me to find another episode of this show, depending if I'm in the mood sooner or eventually later, but this episode was mostly on my mind, and it took a while for me to find a perfect place to talk about this episode, all the while addressing the Bloo analysis video that has officially become a year and a half old, and it's gonna be 2 years old once we head into the summer of this year. I'm just gonna say this right now, that this episode itself, while not one of the best episodes, but it's not one of the worst episodes. This episode will have been something else entirely, but if you want to take that point legitimately, go watch Lovely Lively V's video, because it kind of showcased of how much that the development of Bloo could make sense if you look at it into a different perspective. I may not be the biggest fan of this show, but she is, and she likes Bloo way more than basically most of us. I'm giving this episode a 5.75 out of 10.